Everybody, this is Dream, and we have a nice 7-game slate here for NBA. Before I get started, can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? I have 4 core plays today. Killian Hayes for Detroit, Jordan Poole for Golden State, Thaddeus Young for Toronto, and Trey Jones for the Spurs. I'll get into those players more directly as I go through this slate. But let's go ahead and get into the injury report. For the injuries today, we have for the Raptors, Siakam is out, Van Vliet is out, Achua is out, and Trent Jr. is out. For the Pistons, Cunningham is out. For the Hornets, Hayward is out, and Smith Jr. is doubtful. For the Magic, Banchero is questionable, and Cole Anthony is still out. For the Thunder, Mann is questionable, and Baisley is questionable. For the Celtics, Brogdon is out. For the Suns, CP3 is questionable, and Cam Johnson continues to be out. For the Heat, Hero is questionable. For the Clippers, Kawhi Leonard is out. Wall is out. For the Raptors, Green is now questionable. Tate and Fernando are both out. For the Bucks, Holiday is out. Giannis is probable. Allen is probable. And Beaucamp is probable. For the Spurs, Collins continues to be out. And for the Warriors, Klay Thompson is doubtful, likely to be out, which is why I have Jordan Poole in my core play list. So with that said, let's get into the players I do like today. We're going to start in the guards situation here, and with Killian Hayes, in fact. So Hayes has been starting the last 2 games for Cade Cunningham, and even though his price has come up some, he's still a little bit underpriced. Cade Cunningham has actually been out for 3 games. In the first game, he didn't start, and he came off the bench and played a lot less minutes. But as long as he plays over 30 minutes, his price point is just too cheap today. Assuming that Cade is going to be certain to be out by the end of this, by the time the slate starts. He's going to be a great play on this one. Just too cheap overall. Price really didn't come up enough. Then we're going to look at Jordan Poole here. Now, he's another guy that I just really like here. He's had some monster games when Klay Thompson is out this season. You can see he's had some mid-30s games. He just doesn't play the minutes when Klay Thompson plays. And so that's really the issue, with his potential most days. But in a day where Klay Thompson is out and his price point has come down, he looks like a great play. Looks like he can get 35 to 40 fantasy points pretty easily on this particular slate, especially in a up-tempo game. Then we're looking at Trey Jones for the Spurs here. Now, his price has come down some, which I'm a little surprised considering of how well he's been playing. He's only had 1 bad game really lately, and he doesn't need but 27.5 fantasy points to 5x, so he's a great play on the slate overall. He always a little bit under the radar, I think. But he's just been playing really well, and he plays a good consistent amount of minutes most of the time. So I think he's in a good spot here. Then we're going to look at Steph Curry for Golden State. Now, he's been actually pretty consistent as well, and his price point has come up to over 10,000. But he's in a weird way, he's been flying under the radar, but he's hitting lots of threes. He's getting lots of assists, rebounds, everything. So I'm a little surprised that he doesn't get more love, to be honest, but he's probably the top, expensive guy on the slate overall. Then we're going to look at Devin Vassell for San Antonio Spurs here at $6,700. He's just been pretty consistent. He's not a super play on the slate, but he's been shooting the ball a lot, and he's been shooting it pretty well. He does get some peripheral stats, which helps us as well. And most of the time, he's getting in the 35 to 40 range. He's had a couple games under, but overall, he's in that range. His worst case really is to get a 30-point game, which wouldn't kill you. But again, obviously, we would like him to get around 40 on this particular match. But he's just been really safe and consistent, and I like that. As a good filler option, he can definitely fill in if you need exactly that much money left, and you need to. You have 1 spot left. Jaden Ivey. He's a guy I like as well. His price has come up a little bit with Cade out, but he's still a little bit too cheap for what he's been doing lately. Even with Cade, he was having 35 fantasy point games. He's had some ups and downs shooting the ball and stuff. He's a younger player, so that's to be expected to some degree. But he's been doing pretty well, and so I think he's in a good spot here on the slate against Toronto, who doesn't have half their team, basically. Then we're actually going to look at a Toronto player now with Otto Porter Jr. Now, his price point isn't super ideal, but if he does start, it makes him viable. He's definitely a secondary value play because he can have a blow-up game, but it's just, it's pretty risky. But he should get plenty of minutes, assuming he starts. So we got to make sure he starts, though, before we use him. Scotty Barnes is an interesting play. His price isn't ideal, but he's going to have all the opportunity in this one with all the guys out. Me and him, him and OG are basically the only starters on the team to play today. OG and Ovi is another guy that's interesting. Again, his price point has come up a lot, but he does have the upside, especially with all the guys out. He should have plenty of minutes, assuming that they can keep the game close, which I think they'll be able to against Detroit. I think both teams will score quite a bit of points, and I think both of these guys will have opportunity to have a good game. Keldon Johnson here, he's a pretty safe play at small forward. So one thing about some of these Spurs is that they're pretty consistent, and he's another guy that's very consistent. This is a tougher matchup against Golden State, but he's been really good this season. His floor is, right around 30 or so fantasy points, and his ceiling is pretty high. And so he's the type of player that I like as again, another guy that if you have $7,100 left and you just need to fill in one spot, he'd be a great way to do it. Then we're going to look at Thaddeus Young for, oh, I already have him here, I'm sorry, for Toronto. Now, he should start today again, and again, make sure he does start, but his price is just too cheap for what he can do, even if he, in these minutes. He's going to have plenty of minutes in this one. As you can see, he's had some bigger, had some 20 fantasy point games, but he's really not played the minutes until the last game when he started against Indiana, and I expect him to be able to do that again today, presuming he actually starts, which he should. Then we're going to look at Draymond. Now, Draymond Green should get a little bit more of a kick because Clay is likely out. He's been playing pretty good lately, and his price point really hasn't come up that much, which is a little bit surprising. But he has been inconsistent throughout the season so far, especially minutes-wise. But if in the last 5 or 6 games, the minutes are starting to level out. And with Clay out, he should get a few more. But we do want to check to make sure that Steve Kerr doesn't sit his entire starting lineup again. So do keep an eye out on that information. Then we're looking at Bojan Bogdanovic. Now, he had a few games in the middle there that were pretty rough, and that actually led for his price coming back down a little bit. So he's an interesting spot here against Toronto, who doesn't really have much, and he's got a pretty good focal point, especially with Cade out. He's going to get more shots, and he's been a pretty consistent player outside these 3 games in the middle of the season so far. So I think he's a good play on the slate, and his price point is too cheap to ignore. Then we're looking at Chris Boucher. Now, so him and Bojan play in the same position, and they have the same price point. Now, Chris Boucher should theoretically be able to smash here, but he's been in this situation before where he will have all the opportunity, but and doesn't really do it. As you can see, he has games where he scores literally 3 fantasy points this season, and his minutes fluctuate all over the place. So I do believe that he will be really solid today. But I do caution because in the past, last couple of years, he'd be in a situation like this and just not get it done. It's a little bit concerning, but he should get 30 minutes. But even that, if you look at his minutes, he played 31 and 28 in the last 2 games without Siakam. And why only 28 minutes? He just seems like he should be playing more than that, especially with all the injuries out. But they just kind of have a logjam in that forward position, and they play a lot of different guys. They mix them and match them. So that's just what it is. He comes with some risk. He's not as safe as Bojan, but his upside is higher. So he's a great GPP play at the very least. And then we're going to look at Charles Bassey here for San Antonio. Now, he's a very risky play. He's played 4 games this season, and he's played between 12 and 18 minutes, as you can see. And he's had 18, 18, 26, and 35 fantasy points. Now, do I expect him to continue this? I don't really. The minutes aren't enough to really, feel good about that. But with Collins out, he's playing minutes. It's just not a ton of minutes. And so you do have to be aware of that because he may lay a goose egg. But he is cheap, and he is a kind of a Hail Mary value play. It's just not enough games to be confident that he's going to continue to do this, especially as teams figure out, how to stop him. And he doesn't shoot that many shots. A lot of this is coming from rebounds and assists and blocks and steals. And, rebounds and assists you can kind of replicate, but blocks and steals, that's a little bit harder. We'll have to see. He's kind of in a wait and see pile for me, but he is a value play on the slate. If you really need to save money at the center position, he's a good way to do it. And then finally, last but not least, Al Horford. Now, Al Horford has he started the season off really rough. He really couldn't get going very much, but the last 5 games, he's really taken it up a notch, playing about 30 to 35 minutes a game, and he's getting in those mid-30s in the fantasy points, which is what we expect from him day in and day out. His shooting has gotten up a little bit there too, and it seems like with Brogdon out, he actually gets more shots. So I don't know if that's really the issue here, or if he's just finally playing better as a player in general. But anyway, I do love him on the slate against Oklahoma City. He should have plenty of opportunity to get over 5 or 6x even on this one. His price point really hasn't come up much at all, which is good. Surprising actually. I expected to before I opened it that his price point would be around 6,000, and so him being at 5,400 is definitely nice. So with that said, thank you guys for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. If there's any player that you feel like I left off, feel free to leave that below. And have a nice day, guys.